I am going to record this though, so we probably will have a couple of more people join us. But thanks everybody for joining us on this cold wintry night. And what better way to warm us up than talk about food and nutrition, right? So I am thrilled for our speaker tonight. Maureen is a nutritionist. I don't want to spoil her story, so I'll let her tell you her connection and her story and where she's calling from to make us. So I will turn it over to you, Maureen, and just for housekeeping purposes, we'll hold the questions until the end of the meeting. Maybe if you think of a question, you want to use the chat bar, the chat feature. That might help us get as many questions as we can answered at the end of the meeting. But without further ado, I am turning it over to you, Maureen.
All right, thank you so much. And I'm gonna try and share my screen right off the bat. So if there's a problem, then we can work through it. But let me try that real quick. And okay, can everybody see that? Just maybe give me a thumbs up.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to speak first. And also, just as a disclaimer, so my background, which we're going to go through in a second, is in sports nutrition. So I don't claim to be an expert at Parkinson's nutrition. However, I do have a very special, a couple of special connections to that. But what I do feel a very strong connection to is helping my mom, who is a caretaker. So I know in the audience, we have an awful lot of patients, but we also have an awful lot of caretakers. And so I feel like in order to really be at our best to help our loved ones that are, dealing with this terrible disease, we also have to be at our best. And so what I like to say is that we are all fueling for something, doesn't necessarily have to be a sport, but we're all fueling for life. And that can come in many different forms. I see moms out there, I see grandmas out there. So some of us are just training to be our best for our families. And then, like I said, being a caretaker is no joke. I see it firsthand. And I just want to make sure that I'm providing information for everyone. Certainly, it's going to be applicable to our Parkinson's loved ones too. But really, I'm just going to go through some real just kind of foundational nutrition. And hopefully everybody can glean something from it. Just a little bit about my background. I am from Michigan. I went to Madonna University. I played sports there, so I've always tried to stay very active myself. I became very passionate about nutrition when I was an athlete back in college. I did my internship to become a dietitian in Salt Lake City, which was a really great experience. And then I decided to change gears just a little bit and become a firefighter. So I missed that teamwork and that camaraderie. Still a very much helping profession, which is what I loved. And also a little bit more physical, which is what I was also craving. So I completed 22 years as a firefighter. I worked in Canton Township. And I retired just a few years early because I purchased some years towards my retirement, but that was only because I was able to move on to something really exciting too. So I have been a consulting dietitian at a couple of different places, locally in Livonia at Mercy Elite, and then also at Barwis Methods, which is a training facility in Plymouth, Michigan. I also work pretty closely with my community that I love so much, also the police and fire department. So they also are fueling for big jobs. And so I tried to really help that community as well with their nutrition. So I still am very involved with working with local police and fire departments and EMS. 5 years ago, I took a position with the New York Mets. So I functioned as the New York Mets team dietitian for 3 seasons. And then during COVID, I took 1 year off because they were really restrictive with their clubhouse. And then I joined the hometown team. So right now, I am the team dietitian for the Detroit Tigers, which also has a special connection with me for Parkinson's as well. But with that current position, I had the sudden trip down to Florida, which is why I'm broadcasting from my hotel room. But I am in Florida, where I know the weather is just a tad nicer than what you all are dealing with, because I've seen pictures of the weather back home. So thank you all for joining me on this night. Just a little bit about my personal connection with Parkinson's. On the left that's a picture of my dad and my mom and myself. My dad has Parkinson's. He's had it for just about 20 years now. And so that's where my kind of personal connection and journey. My mom is there on the right. And like I said, she's a caretaker. And fortunately, she's lived a really healthy lifestyle. And she really is kind of the foundation of why I decided to become a dietitian. She was always cooking from scratch, cooking healthy. We never got the opportunity to eat out too often. So that was really something special to me when we did. But in any event, I really see the toll that it's taken on her. And I also see that because she has gone through, her life in a fairly healthy manner, it's really paid off now when she's, called upon to, help care for my dad. My dad, I'll speak a little bit more on him too. He's really been a trooper, but also a challenge for a daughter who's a dietitian. Um, and then on the right, you see Kirk Gibson. So I have my lifetime hero, my dad, and then I have my childhood hero, Kirk Gibson, who played for the Tigers. And I had the honor of meeting him. I cried when I met him because I have just looked up to him for so long. And so when he walked in the clubhouse and I was the dietitian for the Tigers, it was just like a surreal experience for me. So now he and I chat quite a bit about his challenges with Parkinson's. So in any event, that's just kind of how this is so special to me and how I've become more passionate. I hope to do more and more with the foundation to help in any way that I can. This is just a little icebreaker for the entire topic of Parkinson's disease and nutrition, because I thought it would be a really great idea to maybe instill a puppy in my parents' home, because I thought they needed a little something to, keep them active, first of all. But also just a dog brings so much joy, and they both are dog lovers. So a few years back, my husband and I found this beautiful Cavachon, and we brought it home to them. And so they have obviously loved every minute of having Murphy in their life. But I'm going to tell you what, Murphy is he is a smart dog, because he hangs by my dad at all times. And so he knows, similar to having a toddler in the house, as long as he's by my dad, there's going to be a surplus of food coming his way, because the nature of my dad's tremors is that he drops an awful lot of food, and this dog does not miss a beat. And so we are working hard on Murphy's summer body 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, all year round, because this dog has really been a great source of joy. But also, as you can see, he sits at the kitchen table waiting, because he knows there's going to be something good coming his way. So we laugh about that quite often, but that's also part of the reality of Parkinson's disease. So when we look at kind of our lives and all that we have going on, there's just so much that we can't control. Our family life isn't always controllable. COVID, the pandemic, illness is something that we can't always control. Being able to work out in groups and exercise and move our bodies is not always something we can control for a number of reasons, but food is something that we can control. We can make good choices, and we can make choices to help optimize our life wherever we're at in our life, really. So that's what we're going to focus primarily on today with me, is the food part. When we look at our overall health, there's an awful lot that goes into being a healthy human being. Sleep, which is a challenge not only for Parkinson's patients, but also for myself, for everybody really, and trying to carve out that time and figure out a way to manage our medications and our food and all the things that go into really having a good night's sleep. But we know that our body and our brain does an awful lot of recovery during that time. So whether it's an athlete or whether it's, a child, we all need to just try as best we can to navigate that sleep portion. 7 to 9 hours is what research kind of supports that is optimal for us. But I think too, we've also led lifestyles where we believe that the more we can accomplish, the better, and you don't need to rest, and we'll sleep when we're dead, and all sorts of things that really are not the best way of thinking about it. And I think there's more research to go into just how important that piece is. Now, nutrition, obviously, you're going to get a little more of that information than probably you'd like from me tonight, but nutrition is also really important. Eating real foods, whole foods as best you can, variety, and we'll talk about that. Movement is also really important, and I'll touch just a little bit more on that in a bit, but really movement doesn't have to be structured 1 hour exercise. It's just moving your body, staying active. And it's really something that you enjoy and something that you like. But we also know that when it comes to research with Parkinson's disease, staying active is so, so important. And I don't know if my dad is on this call or not. I tried to coach him through the Zoom process here, but I recently started taking him swimming in the pool because his stability is not all that great in his balance. And so in the pool, it's a really safe zone for him. He calls me a drill sergeant, but I get him in there and we go through the paces. But more or less, it's just to have him in a safe environment where he can move his body. The water's warm and it feels good. And then he tends to sleep better. So, you know, any type of movement that you can do and participate, especially in a group where you have that kind of surrounding of like-minded beings, is really important too. And that's where the mental and the environmental component come in. And this is really surrounding yourself with like-minded people, supportive people, whether it's family, friends, support groups, whatever it is. And so, you know, I'm just so grateful for the Michigan Parkinson's Foundation and all the services that they offer, because I know my mom and dad have taken advantage of that and have really felt supported. But that's another piece that, especially through COVID, we've discovered is something that can't be neglected. And that's your, you know, your social life is really an important piece too. So when you can blend all those together and you've got all 5 pillars together, you're really, you know, doing things right. But I know that that's a challenge, especially with all else that you're managing and dealing with. When it comes to general nutrition guidelines, this might seem really simple, but we've got to find something that we can be consistent with. There's a million diets out there, and we've all had friends that have followed diets, or maybe you've followed a diet, you've gone on and gone off, and it's just when you kind of roller coaster through diet plans, that's not the consistency we're talking about. It's really comes down to these basic steps here, which is the first one is hydration. Staying hydrated is really important, especially as we age. We just don't tend to stay on top of it because it usually results in us having to go to the bathroom more often, which isn't always convenient. But hydrating, I'm going to dive into that a little bit more deep. Consistently eating throughout the day. And this is especially important when you're depending on medications. And I know my dad has had his struggles with the medications and protein, and really trying to figure out which foods fit at which part of the day in order to have his medications work his best. So we've worked through some of that, but also, you know, just encouraging you to stay consistent every 3-4 hours, having something to eat so that you have that continuous infusion of calories, which, you know, translate to energy. Our food fuels our body and our brain, and we're going to talk a little more about that too. Carbohydrates are really important when it comes to that fuel for your body and your brain. It's just, we don't always make the best carbohydrate choices. And so I'm going to go through some of the ideal or a little bit better choices when it comes to that. Plant-basing your plate. So this just means eating more fruits and vegetables, because really, if you were to take a stab at how many different fruits and vegetables we're supposed to eat a day, it's 8 to 10. That's a lot. And that seems like a lot of food, but it's really just a mindset of getting more variety into our diet, which helps our gut health. And we're going to talk a little bit about our gut health and that connection with the brain too. And the best way to kind of feed our gut is getting this variety of different fruits and vegetables and different grains and beans and nuts and seeds and that kind of stuff as best you can. But 5 to 6 servings of fruits and vegetables, but 8 to 10 different ones. So that means if you have a salad and you have 5 or 6 different things in there, then you're doing that. But certainly in general, we tend to neglect the color portion of our plate. So that's really where we want to focus a little more. And then also making sure that we include plenty of protein to maintain muscle mass. Plenty of fiber, because I know that regularity can often be a problem, especially with the medications that we take. So fiber helps with that. Healthy fats are also really important for us to include. So we'll go through what some of those are. And then that darn sleep crept back into my slide, because that's always going to be something that I always try and at least remind everyone is a really important piece to rest and recovery. When we look at hydration, are we hydrated? How well are we hydrated? You know, the thing with hydration is probably the easiest way for you to know is to look at your pee and to see kind of where you're at on that color spectrum. You want it to be a light yellow color. And you know, as it gets cooler outside, we don't tend to crave and have that thirst that we might normally have for fluid. Really, any beverage that you drink is considered hydration and fluid, even coffee. The general rule of thumb is half our body weight in ounces of water a day or ounces of fluid a day. And for some of you, that can be really challenging because, like I said, it translates to having to go to the bathroom an awful lot. But trying as best you can to kind of stay in that really light yellow color. Now, one thing or a couple things that might change the color of your urine are going to be vitamins if you take those, and then also some of our medications might. But once again, it's really not about counting calories and counting your grams of protein and counting your fruits and vegetables. It's really about a mindset of just how can I be a little bit better every day and work towards drinking more fluid and work towards eating different fruits and vegetables that maybe you don't normally eat. The thing to also keep in mind with our hydration is half of our blood is made up of water. So if we don't stay really well hydrated, our blood isn't going to perfuse as adequately as it should to our brain and to our muscles and to our, our heart, and and really help to keep you feeling your very best. So as best you can. With athletes, I have them weigh in and out so I can tell if they've lost fluid and sweat. I'm not so concerned about that with this population. I think it's just more a mindset of, am I drinking enough fluid and how can I drink more when possible? But hydration is certainly something, oftentimes when we feel tired and sluggish, sometimes we turn to caffeine to give us energy, and really it's just a matter of we haven't had enough fluid, period, enough of that hydration. There's an awful lot of hydration products that are out there, and it's not certainly something that you need to embrace if you're not out sweating and really training hard like so many of my athletes do. But it is important to be mindful of some of the ingredients that are in some of these products. And the reason that I put this slide up here with all of this stuff on there is because some of them have an awful lot of sugar in them. And, when you're looking at inflammation in your body, we're trying to reduce that amount of sugar that we take in, especially added sugars. And sometimes in an effort to get electrolytes in, we end up taking in a lot of sugar too. There's also an awful lot of products out there that don't have sugar in them that are going to be zero, maybe labeled as zero or sugar-free. And the thing to keep in mind with those products is that oftentimes they add a sweetener to them, and not everybody has got guts that are engineered to utilize those sweeteners the same way. And sometimes they can cause some gut distress or some GI issues. So just be mindful that if you are having some stomach problems, sometimes it can be related to the sweeteners that are in our food. And, with athletes, I often have that problem, and they might blame their protein powder or the meal they had the night before or the meal they had at lunch. But it oftentimes comes down to that artificial sweetener that's in their food. So just keep that in mind. But certainly some of these products can be good for some of our higher risk hydration folks, or folks that, need a little bit of salt to hold on to fluid, and things like liquid IV, things like Gatorade, especially if you're sick and not hydrating real well. Those can be good products to utilize to help with that hydration as well. The other thing is that some people just don't like to drink water. So having a flavored beverage is a way of staying hydrated. And really the bottom line is we want to stay hydrated as best we can. When we dive into the nutrition portion of things, like this is the bulk of it here, this is where things can get really complicated and confusing. And this is where I really want to simplify things as best I can. Basically, our food is broken into micronutrients and macronutrients. And when we talk about macronutrients, those are the nutrients that we're generally pretty familiar with, like carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And so we often think, am I getting enough protein? Am I eating too many carbohydrates? I grew up in the fat-free generation where as long as it was fat-free, you could eat as much as you wanted. No, that's not the way anymore. Thankfully, we've gone through that phase and we're done. But really what we want to do is try and focus or emphasize put more emphasis on the micronutrients. And that's all of the vitamins and minerals, all of the phytochemicals and antioxidants, all of the things that help us with our immune system, help us with recovery, and also help to keep us in tip-top shape as we age. I added on here that our brain, this is where the important reminder comes in. Our brain uses over 20% of our calories to fuel our brain. So the food that you're putting into your stomach is translating to food that's fueling our brain. So this is where we're going to get the most bang for our buck, which is in the micronutrients. So more fruits and vegetables, more whole grains as best we can, lots of bright colored things and lots of variety. And that's where that 8 to 10 different fruits and vegetables come in. Just to translate that to food though, which I often have to do for my athletes because they think that's impossible. There's no way I'm getting that. But if you think about in the morning, if you were to have an omelet and you normally just put some cheese and maybe some chopped up lunch meat or something like that in there for protein, certainly you could take a couple of different colored peppers, maybe a red pepper, a yellow pepper, and maybe some spinach, onions, mushrooms, things like that. Just chopping little bits of that up and adding it to it. It doesn't have to be a whole serving. It's just really trying to infuse it in where you can. Maybe oatmeal is your go-to in the morning. So if you like to have oatmeal, certainly that fiber component is fabulous, but maybe having some fresh berries on top of it would be another twist. Other folks, like for a while there with my dad, we were trying some different protein shakes and smoothies because sometimes food just doesn't sound good. And so when we were making smoothies, we would throw in a triple berry frozen berry mix. So there's 3 right there. And then we throw a little spinach in there. Spinach won't change the taste of your smoothie. It'll just change the color. But it's a nice way to kind of add some more stuff in. So sometimes a smoothie can be a good way and a good catch-all to get some of that variety in, especially if it's warmer outside or if you just don't feel like having a meal at any time, that would work too. Now, certainly those macronutrients are important, and we're going to go through those also individually. Carbohydrates, like I said, this is where the bulk of our food comes, and this is going to be bread, cereal, rice, pasta. Another reminder is I'm going to send this PowerPoint to Julie so that she can send it out to everyone so you can have a copy of it too. But this is going to be all of those grainy things like bread, cereal, rice, pasta, beans, potatoes, whole grain pasta. That's where we are going to get the bulk of our carbohydrates from. Now, they basically can be broken into 2 groups. They can be simple carbohydrates and complex. Complex has fiber attached, which is really important for our gut health, and also really important for regularity, and also really important for our heart health. The simple carbohydrates don't seem to offer that same value. So those are sweets and treats, things that really don't offer anything other than calories. And if you are someone who does not have the capabilities of moving your body a whole heck of a lot, so if you're not real active, then this is an area where we tend to overeat. So sweets and treats are real easy for us to consume, but really trying to be a little bit more mindful of those added sugars is important because that added sugar can contribute to chronic inflammation, which we're going to talk a little bit more about too. When we look at added sugars, this is stuff that comes just from sugar that's added to food. So when you look at the nutrition label, it'll actually say sugar or some form of sugar that's added to a product. I'm not talking about fruit sugar or sugar that comes from milk, because milk is also a sugar. So let's say, for example, you look at a yogurt and your yogurt says there's 8 grams of sugar, but you look at it and you say, well, there's no added sugar. Where is that coming from? That's just coming from the milk, which is fine. When you look at maybe another yogurt and it has 44 grams of sugar and you think, wow, that's a lot of sugar. Now that's going to be something that they've added to it. And you'll see that listed in the ingredients. Fortunately, on the labels now, it'll say added sugars and it'll tell you how many grams. A good rule of thumb is to try and limit that added sugar that's on the label to 25 to 38 grams a day. And that'll really come into perspective when you look at something like Sweet Baby Ray's barbecue sauce that a lot of my athletes and firefighters like to lather their food in. And so if you look at the nutrition facts label of that sauce, you'll see there's 16 grams of added sugar in like a tablespoon of barbecue sauce. So sugar's really hidden in just so much of the foods that we, even in peanut butter now, there's sugar in there. So just being mindful of those added sugars and really trying to gravitate more towards those whole grains is important in the carbohydrates. But you know, a good portion of our plate is going to come from those carbs because that gives us the energy that we need to move our body and to keep our brain functioning really well. The next group, and then the fiber, like I spoke about, that's really the important piece for our gut health. And fiber comes in all different forms, also comes from fruits and vegetables, and then also from seeds and nuts and things like that. When we look at protein is really important for us to build and maintain our muscle mass. And as we age, that becomes even more of a challenge, especially if we're not able to do strength bearing exercise or weight bearing exercise. So we want to maintain as much muscle mass as we possibly can. And we can do that by making sure that we're taking in adequate protein. So how much does that translate to for us? You know, if you divide your body weight by 2.2, this is a little math for you, math skills. It's 0.8 to 2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And really, as a rule of thumb, I usually go with about 1 gram per pound of body weight because often as we age, we need a little bit more protein too, just because our body breaks it down a little bit differently as we age. And so once again, this isn't a matter of having to count your protein grams. It's really a matter of trying to think, okay, where am I getting my protein from every single time you eat? So if in the morning you have oatmeal, you know, maybe you add a little peanut butter to it to boost the protein with it, or maybe you have a small glass of chocolate milk or regular milk along with it. If you have eggs, you're getting your protein. If you have a sandwich at lunch, you're going to get protein from whatever meat is on your sandwich. So it's just being mindful that every time you eat, you're including some source of protein. A smoothie, you're going to add milk to it more than likely. You could add yogurt to it, and that's going to give you your protein. You could have a yogurt with some granola and some fresh fruit. That would certainly meet the criteria too for a protein sourced meal or snack. The thing with these protein foods is oftentimes they come in a really highly processed form. So things like hot dogs, lunch meats, bacon, sausage, the really highly processed meats, that's not the type of protein we want to make the majority of our protein choices from. So trying to limit those as best we can. They're generally really high in salt, and they just fall under that ultra processed category. And then the next group that we've got here is our fats. So fats, similar to carbohydrates, can be broken into really great fats, and then ones that maybe we don't want to use quite so often. So we're looking for fats that are high in monounsaturated fats, and that's going to be things like seeds, nuts, avocados, olive oil, avocado oil. That's really where we want to get the majority of our fats from. So when you're cooking, using avocado oil or olive oil is a nice switch in the kitchen to use those. Your dressings, making sure they're sourced from either avocado oil or olive oil. And really just trying to incorporate more whole avocados if you like that, or avocados on your toast with your eggs, things like that. That's also another really great way to help maintain weight, because what we found with my dad, I hope he's on here so he can hear me using him as an example so much, but with him, he had a little bit of a challenge maintaining weight for a while. So we were just trying to figure out, peanut butter on everything, avocados and things works really well. Seeds and nuts are great snacks because they're calorie dense, and in the opposite direction, we've got folks who maybe don't need all those extra calories. So just be mindful that even though they're a healthy fat, they still come with quite a few calories. So if weight is more of a challenge for you, then maybe not steering clear, but just trying to be a little bit more mindful of our portions with those foods. And then the big thing here is trying to limit the saturated fat. So that's going to be things that are fried. Also, when you look at the carbohydrates that are empty calories, now we're looking at things that have partially hydrogenated oils in them. Those are the emulsifiers in our sweets and treats. And those are the fats that we're talking about trying to limit as much as we can. When we look at inflammation, so inflammation comes in all different forms. Acute inflammation is really good and helpful, because if you get a cut, that acute inflammation helps you to heal quicker. And that's that redness and that swelling that come along with it. If you work out, you train a lot, then you get exercise-induced inflammation, which is these tiny micro tears in your muscle. And that's actually good because it helps the muscle become stronger and more resilient, but still something we want to manage. And that's often where my job comes in as a sports nutrition or sports dietitian, is to help manage that inflammation. And then there's chronic inflammation, which leads to chronic disease, things like cancer, obesity, heart disease, things along those lines. And so how can we manage that chronic disease and inflammation as best we can as we travel through life? There's so many factors that go into that. So lack of sleep certainly plays a role in that inflammation. Stress that we have through life plays a role in that. Our gut health plays a role in this inflammation. Being more active or less active can help or hinder this inflammation. The xenobiotics are things that we unfortunately don't have a lot of control over. They're pollutants that are in the air, maybe things from insecticides that are out there, pesticides. But from a food perspective, we can help to control that inflammation. And that's by taking a look at the things that are on the left there. So the old SAD diet, it's appropriately named the Standard American Diet, which is a very highly processed diet. So trying to not fall under that lifestyle. And eat more whole foods. Alcohol can certainly contribute to that chronic inflammation. Trans fats are, kind of those partially hydrogenated oils that I talked about, trying to limit those as best we can. Processed meats fall under this category, which is why I mentioned earlier, trying to limit those processed meats. A diet that's low in fruits, veggies, and fiber. So trying to increase that fiber as best we can helps with that gut health, and therefore helps with that inflammation, that chronic inflammation. And then limiting those ultra processed and refined foods. So just eating, as best we can, foods that have, minimal ingredients, or foods that are in their whole form. Now, one question that I often get asked is, what about canned fruits and vegetables, or even frozen fruits and vegetables? And really, those are all just fine. Just the whole idea is to eat more fruits and vegetables. And sometimes frozen vegetables are certainly more cost effective, especially if you don't move through your vegetables as often when you buy them fresh. And certainly if canned is what you have available to you, then that is fine too. It's just the idea of eating more of them as best you can. Okay. Okay, so when we look at how should our day kind of be mapped out and how should we plan our day with our food? Fortunately, after years of working in the fire station, I collected an awful lot of photos of food. These happen to be the good ones. There's an awful lot of not good ones that have been collected for my collection of what not to eat too. But when we look at how digestion works, really it takes a while for our food to digest in our bodies. For a full meal, it takes about 3 hours, sometimes more, depending on the composition of your food. So if you did have activity planned, like if you were going to go swimming with your daughter, then eating a full meal of food and jumping in the pool is not a good idea. You want to allow time for your food to digest. And then the other thing goes for when you before you go to bed, having a big meal and then going right to bed. If your food is still, if your body's still going to work on digesting that food, your sleep just isn't going to be as restful. When we look at 2 hours, now we're looking at something maybe more like a peanut butter and jelly, a roll-up sandwich, some oatmeal, a yogurt parfait, a smoothie, something that's just a lot lighter on your stomach that your body can break down and really utilize those nutrients a little bit easier. And often with my athletes, I tell them they should, and especially with police officers and firefighters, you should live in this 2 hour window because you just never know when you're going to be called upon to really exert your body. And your body's going to function better with not a heavy meal sitting in your stomach. So some people like to live in the 2 hour window. 1 hour before activity, your body can really just handle those carbohydrates and it's going to use those carbohydrates. So if you have, an activity that's planned, maybe just having a snack before you go is the right thing to do. And that might be a banana, some fruit, maybe an applesauce squeezy pack, maybe a granola bar or a Cliff bar, something along those lines where your body's going to just be able to digest it real easily. So thinking about how your stomach works is important as you navigate your day. Really, what I suggest is you just try and figure out how many feedings. We don't even call them meals anymore. We call them feedings. If you're not a breakfast eater, that's okay. But you still want to try and get 3 feedings in a day and maybe a snack, just because everybody's got a calorie need that they have to fulfill for the day. And it's really hard to do it if you're just counting on one meal. And also, you'll find your energy is a little bit more consistent when you're fueling yourself throughout the day. So making sure when you have your plate of food or your food, you've got a protein, you've got some fiber, and you have a healthy fat affiliated with that meal, because that's going to help you to feel more satiated. And it's also going to give you that kind of sustained energy rather than these roller coasters of, oh, I feel okay. Now I feel really sleepy again or tired. And unfortunately, the way your medications work too, you have to kind of harmonize all of that together, which can be really challenging. But certainly trying as best you can to just keep some variety in. And then, like I said, protein, fiber, and healthy fats are really where it's at when it comes to a plate of food. And I'm going to show you an example of that too, just to help kind of visualize it a little bit better. So recovery nutrition, this seems to be athlete specific, but it really isn't. It's kind of what should our plate look like to optimize ourselves. And so we want to always make sure that we're incorporating lean proteins. And like I said, that's to help build and maintain the muscle mass that we have. So then we move into refueling, and we want to make sure that when we are active and we are moving our bodies, we always have this constant kind of infusion of carbohydrates coming in to help resupply and give us that boost. Like I said, so often we feel tired and we might turn to caffeine for that, or we might say, hey, we just need a nap, and maybe you do. But oftentimes it's because we're underfueled, like we haven't eaten in the last 3-4 hours. So we actually get to that point of feeling like hangry. And then the other thing is our hydration. So I always encourage you, when you are feeling tired, if you've had some sleep, to at least say, have I had a halfway decent meal or a snack, a solid snack in a little bit? If not, try that route. And then also make sure that your hydration is on point. And then we always want to revitalize, and this comes from our colorful fruits and vegetables. So making sure our plate has that component as well. And then the rehydrating is also, which I think I've talked at plenty of length about, is the hydration piece. When we look at our plate of food, this was a nice little infographic that I put together, and one of my fellow firefighters decided to change it around to what the reality of the fire service is, but it's the reality for all of us. So Ideally, we would love for every day for our plate of food to have our quarter of it be protein, a quarter of it be our complex carbohydrates, and then half of it to be this amazing variety of different fruits and vegetables. But I know that's not how life works. And oftentimes we are at social events or we're too tired to cook or we've had a long day and we're going to eat whatever is available to us. And so we do end up with a slice of pizza on our plate. And that is a-okay. Like there's more to life than worrying about the one meal that you have that that dietitian most says is not right, that there's way more to worry about than that. But how can you bolster that or how can you make it a little bit better? So instead of maybe having 3, 4 slices of pizza because you allowed yourself to get to the point of feeling over hungry, maybe you have a slice of pizza and then maybe you make yourself a nice smoothie to go along with it where you can get some of those different nutrients in. Or maybe you have a small salad along with it. Or maybe you just have an apple along with it. Just whatever you can do to maybe try and improve on that meal and then get on with it for the next meal. Do the best you can. But we all know that life gets chaotic and hectic and busy, and this isn't something to really stress out about. It's just a matter of keeping it real and as best you can, remembering that your plate of food, if you could take that mental picture of that plate, and then life is going to throw you lots of curveballs and you do your best with what you can, but just trying to bolster it as best you can. I mean, in the fire station, this is every time we had a fire, there was a lot of pizzas delivered to us, which was much appreciated because at that point we had been there for 5, 6 hours, but we always at least went back and had a smoothie or had something to try and help bolster that to recover. Some of the common complaints I get related to food from all different walks of clients that I see is, like I've said, I'm tired all the time. How can I remedy that? Well, certainly sleep is the biggest factor, and that can be a challenge trying to navigate our sleep. But always kind of taking a look at your hydration, always maybe you've had too much caffeine. So if caffeine is something you drink or use, throughout the day, sometimes that can actually be counterproductive if you have too much of it. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. And then just making sure your meals are consistent. So like I said, 3, 4 hours in, you're going to start to feel like maybe you should have a little something to eat. So constipation, nausea, diarrhea, I feel like it's either one way or the other so often, especially as we get older. So how can we at least combat these a little bit? Oftentimes it's related to our medications and certainly having those discussions with our doctors is important because they have more powerful tools than food to help deal with that. But also food can be really helpful. So I know that if constipation is an issue, I have a really great recipe for chia pudding that can be really effective. And I'll share that with Julie so that she can put that recipe out for you guys too. It's something I use with some of my paralysis patients, and it's worked really well for them because they have like a whole program in the morning that they have to really kind of go through. But really, oftentimes it comes down to just not having enough fiber in your diet. So as best you can, increasing fiber. Now, the other thing is sometimes folks will listen to me talk and say, okay, I'm going to really increase my fiber. And then we've got the opposite problem because if your gut's not used to it and you start loading fiber in there, boy, you will not have constipation issues, but it might go the other way. So you want to be a little bit careful with how you kind of get your body used to that and get your gut used to handling all of the fiber once you do start incorporating more of those foods in. The other thing is be mindful of those sugar alcohols or those artificial sweeteners because sometimes those can be to blame for some gut issues as well. And then also fluid consumption. So the more hydrated you are, the less tendency you're going to have to be constipated. And then another thing that's really common is muscle cramping. So I think oftentimes muscle cramping gets blamed, on hydration. I know as athletes, oftentimes where they turn is what did the dietitian do wrong that I'm cramping. But so often it's related to our muscle movement patterns. And certainly with some of the challenges that you have with Parkinson's, that can force your muscles to move in ways that you're not used to or that your body just hasn't had to do before. And so some of that cramping can come from that. So hydration certainly can be one of the remedies, but also just remembering that a lot of that can come from just moving your body in ways that your body just hasn't been moved before or consistently been moved before. Caffeine. So this is something that, so many of us use to kind of get through the day, the afternoon, the evening, whatever it might be. Really, the take home point here is to be mindful that caffeine can be in a lot of different things. And oftentimes, obviously, it's not recommended with a lot of different medications. But the thing to keep in mind is that caffeine has a half-life of 6 hours. So if you do depend on caffeine, whether it's coffee or tea or iced tea or maybe soda, You know, certainly there's these energy drinks that are out there that I'm hoping none of you consume, but certainly my athletes like to partake in. Just be mindful that that half-life is 6 hours. So for someone who's an avid coffee drinker, you might think, well, I can drink a pot of coffee and fall asleep, no problem. Well, you might fall asleep because you've trained your body to do that, but your sleep cycle, so that really restful sleep is disrupted. And the same goes for alcohol. So sometimes I have folks who say, well, if I have a glass of wine at night, it helps me to fall asleep. And certainly that might be true because we've trained our bodies in such a way. But unfortunately, it still encroaches on our quality of sleep. And so even if you get 7 or 8 hours of sleep, you might still wake up feeling not rested. And that's because those sleep cycles have not been full and complete. So you haven't had that restful sleep that you really are trying to achieve. When it comes to how much caffeine should we allow ourselves a day, it's really 400 milligrams a day is the limit. And a cup of coffee has about 95, depending on the size of your mug. So if you have a large mug a couple of times a day, you might be kind of over that 400 milligram threshold. So just be mindful of, you know, it's hidden in a lot of things too. Anything you see energy on as a label, it probably means there's caffeine in it. So that's an important piece to remember too. And oftentimes tea is a comforting thing to drink in the evening, but you know, you want to make sure that that's decaffeinated just so that you can, as best you can, optimize your sleep. And then the other recommendation I have is always backing it up 6 hours from your sleep. So for me, I stopped drinking coffee at 1 o'clock, knowing that I'm not going to encroach on my 6 hours before my 7 o'clock bedtime or something. So just being mindful of that is important. Alcohol, I think we've all, you know, been fairly well educated on what alcohol does to our body. And really the main thing here is our sleep. And then also obviously medications can interact with it as well. So I never recommend using alcohol. I think it's more just an education piece to remember that even if it's something as a caretaker that you may have like, oh, it's just nice to have a glass of whatever at night before I go to bed. Just remember that it does have a negative effect on your sleep and your quality of sleep. And also when it comes to a weight management perspective, those calories add up super fast. So sometimes I'll have folks that seem to be doing everything right, but that those liquid calories still add up when you're trying to, you know, achieve certain weight goals of whatever that might be for you. So supplements, I do always like to touch on supplements because I feel like they're abundant in our population. And oftentimes when you have a chronic disease, or really athletes are targeted with them all the time, firefighters are targeted with them. You know, there's an awful lot of people out there that would love to sell you their product in an effort to have you believe that it's something that's going to significantly help you. And unfortunately, there's just so many false claims out there. So I always like to educate that supplements are not regulated the same way our food is. So before you start taking a supplement of any form, you always want to check with your doctor first, because certainly there's always risks of those interacting with our medications. But basically, I just have you think about 3 questions before you even consider taking a supplement. And the first one is it necessary? So can you get it, or can you improve your diet in order to help you to achieve whatever that supplement is you're looking for? And a good example of this is vitamin D. So many of us, not down here in Florida, but in Michigan, are vitamin D deficient because we don't see the sun for 6 months. It feels like maybe longer. And vitamin D is the sun is our main source of vitamin D. So if you do get some blood work done and the doctor says, hey, your vitamin D is really low, well, that's important because vitamin D is correlated with hormones. It's also correlated with bone health. It's also, there's a correlation between soft tissue and bone injuries for my athletes. So I take that one pretty seriously. So I encourage you to at least get that number checked when you get blood drawn. And then if it is low, you're probably going to have to supplement it with a supplemental form of it, because we're certainly not going to have you out in the sun in the middle of the winter for 10 minutes a day to achieve that level if we see the sun. So that's one example. Another example might be iron. So occasionally I have athletes that are low in iron. And if I have a young girl who's a runner, she's probably not going to eat enough red meat to achieve that level. So I certainly recommend that she supplemented at that point. So if you do have a deficiency that you're concerned about, you know, talk with your doctor and find out if it's something you can improve by making some modifications with your diet. And then if it's not, then certainly taking that supplement would be probably the best idea. The other thing you always want to check is it effective? And one route that I recommend you go, and this is a perfect example of walking into, I don't know, a vitamin store or some sort of herbal supplement store, and they're trying to sell you some supplement that might be in there. I think you need to do a little homework and see if it's actually effective and if there's any research to support. One thing that I found to be very helpful is to type in the Google search box, dietitian and whatever that supplement is. Dietitians are held to a much higher standard of practice than just general nutritionists that aren't regulated the same way. And so anyone can claim to be a nutritionist and not have an actual, registration or licensure. So it's important that you seek your information from either a physician or from a dietitian who has to be held to this different moral standard of recommending things. So when you type in dietitian and vitamin D, you're going to get a whole bunch of reviews from dietitians that have done their research to make sure that that supplement is something that's effective. So certainly that's important too. And then the last thing is it safe to take? Like I said, our supplements aren't regulated the same way our food is. So you want to make sure it's third party tested. And over on the right, there's a list of different third party testing groups where at least you know that what they're saying in a product is actually in that product. So getting high quality vitamins or supplements is also important. And you'll see those certifications on those products that fit the mold for that. So those are the three things that are important to ask yourself. Now, another example would be a multivitamin. So oftentimes I have clients or I have athletes that don't eat fruits and vegetables, and they're just honest with me and say, Mo, I'm not going to eat those. So what can I do? At that point, I'm going to say you probably need a multivitamin in your life because we certainly still want you to get those nutrients. And if you know that you're not going to eat them, then we want to certainly implement a multivitamin. Some of my athletes like to use greens powders, and that's fine too. It's basically just dehydrated and pulverized fruits and vegetables. So sometimes we'll do that and we'll throw it in their smoothie, whatever they prefer. But I certainly am concerned when I have folks that just don't eat fruits and vegetables, they only eat brown foods, then we have a problem. We want to get color in their life as best we can. Some of the common supplements that I recommend. So let me go through these each individually here, but I'll go rather quickly so we have some time for questions. Creatine is one of the most researched supplements that is out there. Creatine and caffeine are the two probably most researched supplements. And creatine is really something that has intrigued me, especially for our aging population for cognitive health and to help prevent cognitive decline. Now, I challenge you to talk with your doctors before you just start taking creatine, because certainly that's something a lot of athletes take. I do have my mom and dad taking it. But, I feel like as we age, creatine is something we can get through our food. We get it through meat products. We just don't get enough of it. And so because it is so researched and because it is a safe supplement to take, I use it with a lot of my athletes, but I think that it's something that could be very interesting for our Parkinson's populations in the future. And also for just the aging population, because it does help with preventing muscle degradation. And it also helps with that cognitive decline, preventing cognitive decline. So that's one that's really interesting. In fact, I posted on the top there, you'll see that ISSN position stand on creatine supplementation. If you put that into your Google search box, you'll get that actual position stand and you can read through it for yourself and really kind of educate yourself a little bit on what possibly could be some benefits for creatine. Fish oil is another one. And the reason for this is because I don't think a lot of us eat a lot of fish, but fish oil can be really powerful for inflammation and also for cognitive health. And also for heart health. So it can be helpful with folks who have high triglycerides. It can help to lower those triglycerides. So the recommendation for fish is, eating, I think, 8 ounces a week, and not a whole lot of people get that in. So if you don't take fish oil, that would be one I would at least talk with my doctor about and maybe consider adding. The next thing on there is protein powder. And the reason for this is because I think there's some challenges with getting enough protein, especially for like what I've at least seen with my dad, is making sure he gets adequate protein because he has to really work his medications around that. And sometimes a liquid form is easiest for him. Another thing I do with that protein powder is I add it to oatmeal to kind of bolster the oatmeal and give it a little bit more protein. And another thing I do with it is I can add it to that chia pudding that I spoke about that I'll share that recipe for. And that's just another way to kind of get a lot of fiber and a nice dose of protein to help with that muscle maintenance. And then the last thing on there is vitamin D. And so the vitamin D is something that I recommend you ask your doctors to check to see if you need to, but in the meantime, it would not hurt to supplement some vitamin D as well. So that is one, like I said, if you can get an actual value and then your doctor can tell you, yes, you need to, or no, you don't need to. But in the meantime, especially through the winter months, it might not be a bad idea to at least consider that one as well. This total daily energy expenditure, this is kind of what I talked about at the beginning. So sometimes we feel like, man, I just don't have time in my day to work out or to schedule an hour workout. That's just not doable for me. And that is completely okay. And what I want you to understand is that our body is constantly utilizing calories and burning things, get our calories through the day. Even if we were laying in bed and not doing a darn thing, we're still, 60% of our calorie needs for the day comes from just maintaining, the things that our body needs to do, like our muscle mass, our heart, all of the organs in our body, they all require energy, and that requires calories to be burned. So you still need that even if you're not moving your body. Certainly, the movement that we do throughout the day, trying to move as best we can, is important too. And that's going to contribute to about 20% of our overall calorie needs. Our food, digesting food requires calories too, just to digest the food that we eat. And so that's about 10%. And then the main thing here to notice is that when you do have a structured hour workout, that's really only 10% of our total calorie expenditure for the day. So sometimes we beat ourselves up over not being able to do the activities that maybe we used to be able to do, or maybe the things that we would like to do, we just don't have the time to do it. But remember, it's that overall picture. So you have your calorie needs that your body is going to need no matter what. And there's genetics related to that, and just kind of how our body is composed. And then there's just the movement that we do throughout the day. So really, the more we can move throughout the day, that can be really significant in our overall long-term health. This is just a list of some snacks that I think are helpful to have in the car, to be honest, because I know we spend a lot of time traveling. And if you are out and about, it's important to carry snacks with you, because otherwise you end up at a gas station, or you end up at a fast food place, or you end up someplace that has that highly processed food we talked about. So some things I like to carry with me are dried cereal. I sometimes carry those oatmeal packs because I know I can usually get hot water somewhere to at least have a bowl of oatmeal if I need to. Beef jerky is another good little protein snack. Those RX bars, protein bars, I really like those. Fruit snacks, pretzels. Really, these are just non-perishable items. Cliff bars. And this is important for the caretaker too, who might get stuck at a doctor's appointment for 2-3 hours and not have anything with them, and then have maybe a long drive home. So, keeping some portable snacks with you is, I think, a good idea, whether they're in your purse, in your travel bag, your backpack that goes to appointments, whatever it might be. Those core power shakes, you can get those at just about every gas station now. And those are really convenient. They don't have to stay refrigerated, although they taste better when they're cold. But those are just a nice chocolate, strawberry, or vanilla version of a little protein shake that can help kind of get you to your next meal when you're in a bind. Or else during the day, if you just don't feel like eating, maybe having one of those can be helpful. And then the last thing on here is my contact information. And like I mentioned earlier, Parkinson's disease isn't necessarily my specialty, but I also feel like really great foundational nutrition is important for everyone. And I am more than happy to be a resource for anybody that needs either some advisement to maybe something a little bit more specific, maybe more detail on anything. I have my email listed on there for those of you who aren't on social media for all the right reasons. But I do have a little bit of a social media presence. I'm on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram. And then Julie has my contact information too. And like I said, I'm more than happy to help. And another thing that I recommend is that oftentimes insurance will cover appointments with dietitians if they're referred by your physician. So, and sometimes physicians are connected with dietitians that are a little bit more Parkinson's specific. So I at least think it's a good idea to have that discussion with your doctor if you're having any challenges related to nutrition, to maybe get a referral to see a dietitian who can really help you to navigate some things that seem overwhelming, or some things that seem like just, I don't know where to start or where to begin. Because I know me personally, I'm passionate about helping people be their best versions of themselves, whatever that might be. And I know I have a lot of other colleagues that feel that very same way. So hopefully you gleaned a little bit of information from this, but if not, I'm happy to provide more information.
Oh, wow, Maureen, amazing. Thank you so much. That was so helpful. I just would like to make one comment that I'm so glad that you touched on. And that is always the most frequently asked question about protein and Parkinson's disease. And all too often I hear from people who say it's just too much and I avoid protein. And I try to tell people that protein is so important for so many reasons. It also, you touched on like the strength part of it. And, you know, protein helps decrease falls, right? And improve wound healing. I mean, there's the building blocks that you kind of touched on. So I'm glad you did, because I'd like to emphasize to people, you can't just omit protein. You know, while it's true, it may interact with your carbidopa, levodopa absorption. It often happens for people that have had the disease greater than 5 years and later in life. So thank you for bringing that up. I just wanted to say that.
Well, I think that that's a really common problem with really our population, is we become very carbohydrate focused. And, you know, when it comes to maintaining muscle mass, that's something I harp, and I don't see my mom on here, so I want you to get on her or my dad about this.
No
Oh my
problem.
goodness. I think it's the technology challenge probably is the problem, if I had to guess. But in any event, I really have stayed on them for practicing getting up off the floor. I mean, I'm a first responder too, and I know that unfortunately, if you can't get up off the floor or someone's not there to help you, I mean, as a caretaker, I make my mom get up and down off the floor because, you know, she's the one that's doing an awful lot of stuff at the house. And if you haven't been down on the floor lately, trying to push yourself back up can be hard. And I always tell her, you don't want to army crawl to the door to let the fire department in, if that's even the route to go. I don't know. But that muscle mass is so important, and strength. So even something as simple as getting down on the floor and getting yourself back up off the floor as a caretaker is important.
That was a lovely rendition of some music. So I did quickly just hit mute again, because I'm not sure if you have a question, maybe you can unmute yourself, but hopefully we can identify the music in the background.
And if you don't know how to unmute, just wave your hand and we'll get to you.
Order your new 2023 Ford Explorer today. Whether you're running a
Is that you, Adele? Do you have a question?
Oh, no, not right this minute.
Okay, it's nice to see you.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't see any questions. That just goes to show you what a great presentation that was, Maureen. Really, it was great.
Thank you all so much for taking your time out tonight. Now I hope you all put your warm pajamas on and go to bed.
Right. Yeah. Oh, can I have one more another question though? When the protein shakes, is there, I know you said the core power, but is there, so we're just want to look and see if there's any sugar in those protein shakes. Is that what I kind of got from the presentation?
So that's a really good question. I think what I'll do is I'm going to put together a little list of some of my go-to products that I like, not only for my dad, but for some of my other, even for my athletes that I use. And the reason for that is it can be confusing at the grocery store. So I'm just going to list them right out. Core Power is one of them, but also, you know, when you if you're making a smoothie at home, if you have a blender, just using yogurt, plain Greek yogurt works really well because it's thick and it has that nice consistency. And then it's going to take on the flavor of whatever you put with it. So you could put some honey in there. You could put some fresh fruit, a banana. You could put cocoa powder in there, kind of blend your own concoction, always adding, you know, that spinach because it won't change the flavor, just the color, but it'll really bolster it. But also some of those ready to drink shakes, that I like, I'm going to list out for you. And then I'm also going to, I keep talking about this chia pudding, but I'm telling you, it's life changing. If constipation is in your life, this chia pudding will remedy that immediately. And it's really tasty. In fact, kids really like it. It tastes like tapioca pudding. So I'll include that recipe in there too. And then also a protein powder that I like, that's just a straight protein powder. So sometimes a powder in your smoothie or in your oatmeal, things like, I add it to muffin mixes, pancake mixes, just to bolster it a little bit more.
Thank you. That is so helpful. And I know we have another question, but I also wanted to mention that I love how you're talking about, maybe thickening too, because thickening with these smoothies or protein drinks often are maybe a little easier to swallow to avoid
Absolutely.
because choking happens with thin fluids like water.
Yeah,
So thank you.
absolutely. The chia seeds work really well for that. And then they're just going to add that really nice fiber component. Another thing I've added to protein shakes with some of my athletes that don't get enough fiber is white beans. And that really thickens up a protein shake. So you could take a half a can of white beans, rinse them really well to get rid of kind of the salty part of it. And then throw that into a smoothie as your protein, and you're going to get fiber. And white beans really have no flavor to them, especially when you blend them, and it makes it really nice and thick. So that's just another way of kind of, I don't know, tricking people into having more of that fiber and protein.
There is a question. Does red meat protein alter the absorption of carbidopa?
So I think you'd probably speak on that better than me, but I think it's another protein. So I don't think it matters if it's a lean protein or red meat protein. It's going to have the same effect on that.
Right, I agree. Let's see. Okay, Adele, let's see. Why is this not unmuting? Adele,
Okay.
can you hear us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Well, I came in a little late to the talk, but how long should you wait between the medication and taking in protein?
So, everybody is different, but oftentimes they recommend anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour before or after, either way. But it's really almost a little bit trial and error for everybody because everybody's absorption rate is different with even the
Right.
foods they're eating. Do you want to add to that, Maureen, or?
I just want to say, I think a big fear comes in when, at least with my dad, that remember, it is that 30 minutes to maybe an hour and not all day, because I think it gets translated into, I can't have protein, and that's not the case. It's just spacing it out. So I think also maybe thinking about your food and feedings, like I said, rather than necessarily meals, like, okay, I need 3 protein feedings a day, and then kind of plan them around your medication a little bit, but certainly still making sure you get it is important. So we don't want you to avoid it altogether, because like I said, there's a strong correlation between maintaining that muscle mass and your bone strength. Muscles protect our bones.
Thank you.
And you look like Adele, you look strong. So we got to make sure any of that muscle mass you have right now, we keep it.
Yeah.
Adele is a warrior.
I can tell.
For sure. Let's see, there's another one. Do you have any suggestions to add to smoothies or meals for those who need to gain weight?
Oh, that's one of my favorite questions, is how to gain weight. Really, peanut butter and avocados and trail mix. So for smoothies, I would say any type of nut butter that you like is really great in there, and it's going to make it really creamy and delicious too. I think one of the favorite smoothies for my athletes and some of my other clients is a peanut butter banana smoothie, and that's just chocolate milk. I like Fairlife chocolate milk. They don't pay me to promote them, but their milk is ultra filtered, so its protein is a little higher and the sugar is lower. So I like to use their milk because it's creamy. And then I put a banana in there, and then I put some spinach in there, and then I put a lot of peanut butter. And then I usually put a vanilla yogurt or some protein powder in there, and that makes a delicious smoothie. You can always add chia seeds to that, and that's going to thicken it up even more. And that's going to add more of those omega-3 fatty acids like fish oil at omegas, which is really good. And then it's also going to add more fiber. You can also avocados, they sell those now already pre-cut and frozen in the frozen food section, and you could throw a few of those into your smoothie, and that's going to make it really creamy and add some really great calories to it too.
Here's another question. Anything to help with lessen the phlegm?
Yeah, I know that is such a challenge, and I feel like dairy sometimes can be correlated with that. So my suggestion would be if you know dairy products don't work well for you, maybe going with some of the plant-based options, especially if it was for a smoothie or something. You could use almond milk, unsweetened vanilla almond milk. Now, the thing to keep in mind with our plant-based milks is the protein isn't as high, but that's okay because you can maybe add something else, like maybe the white beans would work for that. But I do think there's a correlation between phlegm and dairy for some, not for everybody. So if that is a problem, maybe try for a week to limit the dairy and see if it helps. And then if that doesn't help, then we probably have to look at some other options. But I know that that's a frustrating one.
Yeah. And yeah, for those of you who did join late, this program is being recorded and it will be on our YouTube channel, just like all the rest of our programs. And I have to give a quick plug for next month while I have a good audience. Next month, we're going to have Dr. Nico Bonin from University of Michigan, who is going to talk about dementia, Lewy body. It's very confusing, these terms and how do you know what is what. So we're eager to hear his talk as well. It's always the third Tuesday of the month, 7 o'clock. On Zoom right here. So it's my plug. Sorry. Any other? Oh, and can I just add to, Maureen? I do think a lot of times people downplay the importance of seeing a speech therapist because they don't think that they have a problem with their voice, but it's not just your voice. You know, if you do have swallowing issues, they can do a swallow evaluation. They can also assist and help with you as well to address some of the phlegm buildup too. And a diet, just as Maureen said, a lot of times dairy does have a lot to contribute to
I
it.
think too, a lot of times speech therapists work closely with a dietitian. So if they come up with something that can be helpful, then they often refer you to see a dietitian. And then you're going to get caught in that whole complete package of now they're going to do a full diet assessment on you, which I think is a really great loop to get caught in. Just the more resources you can utilize, the better.
Yes, all about multidisciplinary.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Phyllis, do you have a question for us?
Mine was the phlegm.
Let's see. Phyllis, do you think you could do the chat box? I'm not sure why we have really bad feedback when we hear you. Or was I the only one?
She
No,
might
I
have
did
her
too.
phone and her computer on.
It was bad feedback. While we're waiting for Phyllis and okay, there we go.
This was
Okay,
phlegm.
first was the phlegm question. I was just going to say, if anybody needs help finding our YouTube channel and the YouTube videos that we have recorded, all, like Julia said, all of our virtual education series, as well as our exercise classes and past symposiums are on our YouTube channel. So if you need help finding that, it's on our homepage in the top right corner. It's a little circle with a play button. But if you need help, just call our office and we can direct you where it is.
Julia, maybe we need to do a smoothie demo during one of your class at one of the Tuesday night groups. And we can do a tasting. That would be fun.
Come on over. I'm ready.
All right.
For it. I'm ready for it.
Let's do it.
Yeah. No, I think this is great. I like I said, this is, I mean, one of the top 5 topics that come up consistently, and I don't think that, I think people are still learning And it's so great to hear. I also really loved what you said about the research, with, searching out the supplements and putting
Mhm.
nutrition with that too. A lot of times people just use really expensive supplements that maybe aren't necessary. And so I think that was just great that you touched on that. So I look forward to doing more stuff,
Sounds good.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to be very respectful of your time and everyone else's, and want to encourage everybody to get a good night's rest and then join our exercise classes in the morning. I don't know if anybody else has any questions, or if I think we're good.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Maureen, so much.
You guys have a
good
great
night,
rest of your
everybody.
night.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.